Hey there. This episode originally aired on my Patreon many months ago, so some of the information might be a little bit outdated by now. If you'd like to check out episodes as soon as they come out, you can join my $3 tier over there, or you can subscribe to check out full episodes coming here eventually. Either way, the choice is yours. Enjoy the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Pat's Creative Podcast, episode 8, if all things go according to plan. You know, these get recorded like so far ahead of time, I always stumble on what the actual episode number is. But rest assured, all episode numbers aside, I can guarantee you that this episode is featuring none other than Wayneisboss. That's correct, right? Wayneisboss, not a boss?
Yeah, it's Wayneisboss, unless
Awesome.
it's on my PlayStation account because some hack fraud out there took Wayneisboss.
What is wrong with people like that who just take names that you happen to also want? Wow, it's almost like they want names as well.
Well, I think that hack fraud was me. I think I used that name once, and then I accidentally botched the account and I had to start over. I don't remember.
That's usually the case. I feel like that happened to me with my CSGO IGN or something like that. I don't remember, one of the games back then. Or maybe it was Team Fortress 2 even. Maybe it was that long ago. Wayne, would you care to introduce yourself to everybody and what you do?
Well, my name is Wayne. I am a content creator on YouTube. I've been working on game reviews for the past... I can't quite remember. I want to say maybe 4 years, 5 years, something like that. Before then, I was trying to do stuff like Let's Plays and that sort of thing. I tried doing a couple of countdown videos. Eventually, while I was in college, I kind of hit my niche by trying to record a couple of reviews of games. I enjoyed that the most, and I was working on an animation degree, and so I was working in like a lot of the Adobe products that helped me kind of form that craft, and so that's just kind of what I ended up doing. Am I good at it? Not yet, but I'm working on it all the time, so you know.
Well, I do want to say that one of the reasons, well, usually after I have the guests introduce themselves, I like to go over how I kind of personally discovered them or whatnot. One of the reasons I was very fascinated by your content specifically is how well you were actually doing it too, because like it's really tough to, because I understand, like I kind of found you amidst your Metroid month, which you know by then will be over. I guess it's technically over now, but even way back like 5 years ago, I tried to start my own similar thing of having like Metro March or something like that, and I've been on like a second Metroid Wind, and I discovered this, and I was like, this guy uploaded this and like this last week and stuff like that. Like the time it takes you to upload is pretty crazy compared to the quality that you put into it. So I would say that's one of the things I'm most impressed is just by like your ability to work that hard on a product and get it released at that kind of schedule. And I think I even saw somewhere when I was doing a little bit of research, I don't know if it was your channel bio, your Twitter bio or something like that, but you were basically making jokes about your infrequent schedule. And I was very confused because I was like, this guy seems to be pretty on top of it, right? Or is that like a recent change?
So that was definitely a recent change. I want to say when I first started making videos, there would be months between videos that I made. It wasn't until Spider-Man on the PlayStation 4 was coming out that I kind of it was summer break at college, and I was instead of going home, I decided to live on campus for the summer. I had a part-time job there as a culinary chef.
Oh wow.
Culinary chef was on the job job
Right.
title. In reality, I was a fry cook in a fancy coat. So it was, it wasn't anything that great.
I mean,
I'm not
fry cook in a fancy coat is still a pretty awesome job description, at least from hearing it.
Yeah.
I wish I could call myself a fry cook. Be a nice experience to have under my belt. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Oh no, you're fine. It was some of the most like the most amount of free time that I ever had. I should have been working on my culminating project during most of that time, but I ended up getting distracted because I was so excited about Spider-Man coming out that I had this idea where I was like, there are so many Spider-Man games out there I want to talk about. I'm just going to look at all of them. And so I set out by starting with the 2001 game on the PlayStation. And for a while there, I reviewed every single 3D Spider-Man game up until the release of the Insomniac game later that year. That happened within the span of a couple of months.
Wow.
There were a couple of videos that somehow, and I just looked back over this recently, I don't know how I managed it. I got like a video out like 2 days after a previous review. Now,
That's
back then,
impressive.
the level of quality wasn't quite on par with what I'm doing now.
Sure.
Um, and I think I experimented at one point with even just trying to go off script and not even writing script, just kind of like freehand it. And I don't recommend doing that. I haven't really. I do that now, but only for side quest reviews, which is when I take a look at something that's current. Um,
So that kind of poses an interesting question I did want to ask you is, because I notice you do use scripts for at least most of the videos that I've seen. Do you feel like you are more articulate with a written fashion or in free spoken? Because I know some creators who kind of lean either way. Some people, if you just give them a microphone and say go, they'll have a much better time formulating their thoughts than when they actually try to type it out in front of them, right? Which one do you feel you kind of lean towards?
I have definitely always felt more comfortable behind the written word.
Gotcha.
Um, when it comes to getting in front of a microphone and stuff, I mean, as a Patreon reward, I have a blooper reel because when I get in front of a microphone to record, I am a bumbling fool and I will I'll stumble over my words and I'll say things wrong constantly.
Sure.
And I'm not great at just improving my speech, unfortunately. I wish I was a little better at that, and I have gotten better as time has gone on. The more that I have worked on scripts for videos, and the more I've gone back to
Sure.
those videos and kind of listened to what speech patterns I do like, which ones I don't, the way I put together sentences and everything. As I started to hear myself talk, I've learned from myself how to speak better.
Of course.
So
And I think content creation just really does that a lot, is it really helps you learn more how to articulate your thoughts because you have to articulate your thoughts to like a broader audience, right? Like I feel like even just in normal day-to-day circumstances, I'm able to communicate a lot better specifically because I work in an art field that's designed for communication ultimately. I mean, every art field is.
yeah,
So when you have to hear yourself talk over and over again, you can't help but subconsciously think of little tweaks in your mind of how you can adjust it or whatnot. But also, I was kind of similar to you in that sense when I first started out. I found that writing scripts, I could very much better get my points across or whatnot. But when it came to actually recording them, I would stumble over the lines quite frequently because I'd have so many other like thoughts and tidbits I want to throw in or whatnot, and I just couldn't really do that with like the script fashion. That said, I
hmm
like to think I'm still relatively comfortable with the script, but over time, I think I've leaned more towards just free form discussion. Hence, why I do a ton of podcasts or whatnot. And
yeah.
but yeah, it's just something interesting because like it always differs through other people. But to backtrack a little bit, back to talking about your upload schedule or whatnot, you're saying that you were able to get out like a video 2 days after it first came out and whatnot. Do
Yeah.
you feel like was there something, some kind of change that you could immediately point to say like, oh, that's what made it click for me being able to upload a little bit faster? Would you say it's just kind of over time gradually getting faster and faster, or how would you describe your change in that front?
So, unfortunately, I think I'd have to chalk it up to obsessive behavior.
Okay.
It was more I had a deadline coming up because the game was close to getting released, and I wanted to get that video done as soon as it came out, which I mean was it didn't really pan out the way I wanted to anyway because it took me like a month, somewhere between a month and 2 months to get the Spider-Man PS4 video done. Now that video ended up being a little over an hour in length. So, that's part of the reason why it took so long to finish. Um, but I burned myself out so hard getting those videos out. Um, and unfortunately, it did affect other aspects of my life. I won't get into all of it here, but
Sure. But
uh,
creatively, it was draining, right?
creatively it was very draining, socially it was very draining,
Mm,
and that does also sometimes affect your relationship with other people. And I look back on that and I think these were kind of when I was starting to see those stemming signs of a workaholic mentality that I've been trying to get better about.
sure.
Yeah,
Do you, do
this
you, sorry, continue. Go ahead.
I would say this past year, um because I started getting that weekly upload schedule. uh, felt a little bit more manageable. And it still got to a point where I'm like, all right, I'm overworking myself a little bit, and I need to learn how to be okay with working less on this. And I enjoy it, of course, but it is also incredibly draining.
It's kind of a problem when you enjoy it too, because then you don't really register it as working, and you end up working like a ton without realizing that you're actually working because you enjoy it. But even if you enjoy work, work is still work, right? And you definitely need to be able to separate that a little bit and understand when to just relax a little bit more or whatnot. Yeah, I've definitely had a lot of like similar burnouts or whatnot. But in general, would you say, so you said you now have like a weekly schedule, right? And do you feel like you're able to keep up with that like for the foreseeable future, or?
No.
No?
in a word, no. I am actually, I just wrapped up Metroid Month. The last video for that went up yesterday. And at the time of the recording of this podcast, it went up yesterday. It was a Halloween special. But I had been planning for a while that once Metroid Month was over, I was going to be taking a week off. And for the rest of this week, I'm not allowed to work on videos. So I can recharge a little bit. After that, I'll be working on a new schedule where I'll be uploading bi-weekly. So I'll have 2 videos a month rather than a video every single week. Partially just to better watch my own mental health. And,
of course.
And that sort of thing. It doesn't help that like I got promoted at work, so I'm an assistant manager now, so I'm working a full-time job there. When I'm getting these videos out once a week, that's another full-time job that's just getting stacked on top of that.
Absolutely.
And there's very little room for anything else. Sometimes that includes food and sleep, and
for sure.
Yeah. So it's not what I would recommend.
Yeah, definitely. But you're still trying to set up some form of schedule. Do you feel like having a set schedule just ultimately makes you work faster or more efficient or work harder? Like, is it easier to kind of, do you feel more comfortable with your creation pace because you have deadlines basically to align it?
Absolutely. I like to know when I need to get something done by.
For sure.
Because then it's easier for me to plot out, especially... I will say one thing that's been super helpful with doing a video a week for the past 3 months, I want to say, has been that I've gotten a better idea of how long it takes me to do specific things. Like now I know when I'm looking at a script, just by how many pages it is, how long the video is going to be.
Right.
And so it does help me with learning how to like pace myself out, and it's like, okay, I can take this day off, and then this day I can get this done and just this, and I'll have time to do this later.
Right. So do you have like fears of procrastinating if you wouldn't have had a deadline to do that? Like, do you tend to procrastinate if the deadlines are more loose?
I did. That was definitely something through high school that I want to say I was pretty bad about.
Sure.
As I get older, I'm starting to put together that a lot of my perceived laziness growing up when it came to work on stuff was, I think a part of it was kind of stemming from just some like unrealized anxieties and stuff like that. Possible mental conditions that I'm not entirely sure about and I'm not diagnosed for, so I don't want to speak too much on.
Sure.
But as the public consciousness is becoming more aware of mental illness and things of that nature,
you also become a little bit more aware.
Yeah, or at least it starts to like, things start to click together.
Sure.
You're like, oh.
You start drawing between the dots or whatnot. You're like, oh, okay, there's starting to be a picture here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's like I was definitely more prone to procrastinating back then. Once I got to college, something changed, man. I think there was a different pressure there. It was like I was finally moving away from home, and it's probably worth noting I was also homeschooled, so there was a
Same
different.
Here.
Oh, were you? Okay.
Yeah. I also procrastinated up until college too, so.
yeah. So I think you know exactly what it is. It's like it changes when you're in that different environment.
Yeah, for sure.
and you've got somebody else holding you accountable. It's not just, your parents.
Yeah, there's something strange about like family teaching you, because it's like you're very much used to your family teaching you about everything and how many times you like make mistakes growing up or whatnot, that it becomes easy to see mistakes are just mistakes that I learned from, as opposed to school. It's like, or college, mistakes are mistakes that affect my GPA and my possible future career. So it's like you can't help but feel a little bit of stress. And I went a little bit too far that direction, where I was feeling way too much stress about that kind of stuff, which now I feel like I've just gotten a handle on. I very much enjoying my time at college and whatnot, but it's definitely a transition or whatnot for sure. I'd like to kind of, so the type of videos that you make not only are videos that I watched a crap ton of, like going into YouTube or whatnot. In a lot of my early days, I would try to kind of build off those and try to make my own versions or whatnot. Ultimately, I just did not have the sense of time management or even understanding the weight of how much work goes into these projects. It's so easy to just see it online and think like, because I know how to do it, I can, and I can do it in this time frame, which is not the greatest thing to think, right? So you start working way too big, you pull out way too big of a project instead of just starting small and building off that. And ultimately, I didn't really get anywhere with those type of videos. But it was still a very big part of like what I watched or whatnot, and why also I very much appreciate your channel, because I see that you're able to put these full quality written scripts. Even this latest like Other M one was like surpassed a half an hour, right? Like that's a lot of editing, it's a lot of times where you got to re-listen to your own like voice and whatnot and mess with. So I very much admire that about you. And some other new creators popping around, Scott the Woz, who's been blowing up like crazy, his is kind of similar.
I've heard that name.
Scott the Woz
times.
Are you often referenced to Scott the Woz?
Oh, constantly. We even have a tally mark at work where people will come into my store and ask me if I'm Scott the Woz.
You know what? Yeah. I honestly didn't even see it until now that you mention it. I feel like now I would be the person who walked in the store and says that, because there are definitely some visual similarities. But also, and it's just kind of crazy that you guys also both happen to make comedic scripted videos on games and whatnot. But yeah, all that to say, like, there's definitely like a step-by-step process, right? When it comes to you making those videos, would you say like the first thing that comes to your head is like an idea, or like you're just playing the game and you immediately feel like, oh, I need to make this into a video now and review it or whatnot? Or is it more just like you want to make these certain kind of videos and you find different games to fill those the games to be like a vessel for your video creation or get your voice out there or whatnot? Like how do you get your inspiration for what you make, basically?
A lot of it comes from inherent passion for a particular game. I would say like Spider-Man is because I really like Spider-Man. So, it's I was excited about the game coming out, so I want to talk about those. Beyond that, there will sometimes just be games that I find super interesting, or games that I grew up with. Treasure Planet on the PS2 was a review that I really loved working on, because that's a game that I had as a kid, and I have a lot of really fond memories of. And it's one of those things where it's like I either want to share this with people who didn't even know this existed, or just kind of excite the people that were like, hey, I had that when I was younger. I always love seeing those too. Like when other people do it and they pull out this one game from their childhood, it's like, oh, it's just nice to see like because everybody's got one of those games like where it's like, oh, I grew up with this and I loved the heck out of it. Hardly anyone even knows it exists. But like every time I see other people do it, I'm like, you know what? Good for them. Good for them for showing them this big passion of their childhood or whatnot. Anyway, sorry, continue. Oh, you're fine. Yeah, that was like, I will say that sometimes I will get struck with an idea for a game because I just find it fascinating.
Sure.
And people don't talk about it enough. I'm like, I want to make a video about that. Zone of the Enders. It was a big one. I did a review of the Zone of the Enders, the first Zone of the Enders game. And it was probably one of my worst performing videos because people don't care about that game.
Sure.
One other series that I was super happy to work with was Klonoa, as that's a franchise that I think is starting to get a little more into public consciousness. The cult following is starting to grow, and more people are starting to talk about it. But you still have the vast majority of people have no idea what it is. And I was really excited to sit down and work on those videos, but also because I spent over $200 on a copy of the original game, and I was going to make that money worth it. So,
Sure, sure.
um, uh, and I enjoy the history of things. I enjoy teaching people something they didn't know about. One of my favorite things I got to do for Metroid Month was, I believe in the Metroid 2 review, I got to talk about Zebus Invasion Order, which was a game book. It was like a choose your own adventure novel based on the original Metroid title. Um, that was released only in Japan the same year that game was released, and I never knew that existed until I was doing the reviews for the games. And
Right.
that's the sort of thing that excites me. I want to be able to talk to people about the history of the industry, sometimes things that stem from just outside of the games. I've always found that sort of stuff fascinating, and that was definitely something that was heavily inspired by people like Cakecore or Some Call Me Johnny, is where they kind of delve into the wider history behind the development of a game rather than
Right.
just the game itself.
Yeah, I like the way you do it too, because when you bring up all these extra things about it, you always find a way to incorporate it pretty heavily into the review. Like, even when you're just giving introductions about the game's narrative or whatnot. I remember, I think it was the Fusion one specifically I was watching. You do a good job of giving like step-by-step process through the narrative of the whole game, but you have like these little checkpoints where you then bring up something that influences the gameplay because of that little bit or whatnot. And that was something I thought was very interesting, especially for a game like Fusion, where the narrative and gameplay definitely affect each other so greatly.
Yeah.
And of course, we could talk this whole podcast just about Metroid stuff, and I'm absolutely trying my hardest not to, because I do love Metroid. But
Yeah.
so, and then after you kind of get like that spark of inspiration, is it just next straight to like writing the scripts, or is there some other kind of process that helps you formulate your words better? Like, do you find that you have to play it a certain amount of time while recording or something like that? Or
Before I ever start working on a script, I play a game through its entirety. If I can bear to, there have been one or two occasions in which I almost didn't finish a game for a review because I just wasn't sure how much more I could take.
Right.
I think the Marvel like movie tie-in games that I did earlier this year were kind of an example of that, where I got close to just quitting the Incredible Hulk because I couldn't take one more second of it. But I play them through their entirety. Sometimes it depends on my mood, really.
Sure.
Sometimes I'll sit down with a notepad, and while I'm in the middle of playing, I'll be there with my Elgato over here, and I'm sitting in front of my TV, and while I'm pausing it in between like 20 to 30 minute segments, while it's rendering out those last videos I just got done recording, I'll start jotting down notes based on what I've played. Sometimes it will delve into like just quick ideas of things I wanna touch on. Is like, running speed does not translate into speed and distance while jumping.
Right.
That's weird. And then sometimes I'll get so fed up that by the time I get to the end of the page of notes, I just start scribbling obscenities about my experience.
Of course.
It's
And that makes the director's cut, right? Go to his Patreon, find all the obscenities that he writes down,
Yeah,
about specific games.
that's the Snyder Cut. Actually, I do offer my scripts as a Patreon reward, because sometimes there are jokes or ideas that I will have in a script that never make it into a video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of another thing I wanted to mention. This kind of ties into it. Because I've noticed you've mentioned a lot of times before about like, or a lot of times. I mean, I guess I've seen you mention like ideas or concepts that you want to like put in, but you're always worried about like having too long of a video, or just things being too full and not making the important stuff kind of harder to find. What in general, how many like ideas do you feel like doesn't make it into the final product, and what's your process for picking and choosing or whatnot?
It's typically not a lot. Sometimes there have been segments that I've taken out from a script because I'm listening back over the voiceover, because once I voice everything over an audition, I'll take the time to sit down and then clip it all together into on the timeline to make it just a concise audio file, so I can bring that into Premiere later. Once I have all that on my timeline, then sometimes I'll be listening over something and be like, I don't like the way that's delivered, and I don't feel like re-recording it. That's getting cut. Sometimes it will be, there's a joke or a gag that I really want to do. I wanted to do this whole skit for the Other M review, where I've got this replica of the arm cannon, and I was going to be making a crack about how, well, if I was Adam, I wouldn't trust myself with Samus's gear either, and then there was going to be this whole scene of me, like, using the arm cannon to cook toast. I don't know. It was like these whole, like, stupid ideas that sometimes it's a visual gag that takes longer to make, and it's one of the unfortunate things about trying to do a weekly schedule, is that there's so little time. There's no wiggle room to mess around with.
Of course. So would you say, like, most of the taking stuff out, it just happens on the moment? Like, you just randomly feel like, you know what? This is not working. I'm going to take it out without a second thought. It's out. It's gone. It's yesterday.
Almost always. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of any other circumstance where I decide to take something else out otherwise.
Gotcha.
I think it's always just kind of a spur of the moment thing while I'm working on it.
Of course. And your projects are usually a good mix of kind of analytical, like, viewing of the game, you know, putting it on a critical level, and then also trying to very much to be comedic and whatnot. Do you find that there's ever, like, moments where you're like, this would just be too comedic to the point where it distracts from what I'm actually trying to say, or like vice versa, where it's like, I'm talking way too much about the physics of the game, I need to have something that kind of loosens the tension right here, or something like that? Would you say is there's a general process, or is that just kind of all natural to you at this point, as to like, oh, this would make a funny joke, so I'm going to do it, or whatnot?
That's constant for me. I'm constantly worrying about whether or not I will say, again, I think one of the biggest names out there that really encouraged me to get into it was probably Some Call Me Johnny. It was Some Call Me Johnny and Cakecore. And they are at a bit of a contrast. Johnny can be really funny, but for the most part, I love the almost like there's almost like he's very eloquent.
Okay.
He's relaxing to listen to because he just he's a guy that just sounds.
And then
like
on the opposite side, there's Caddy, which is very bombastic and less methodical.
He's very explosive and expressive, and I love that about him too. It's like, I think there's definitely a place for both. Mm-hmm. And I will say, having actually met Caddy, wonderful human being. Of course, he's delightful man. Very very nice guy. But he is also, like, he's very energetic in person too.
Absolutely, I imagine that. I can't imagine separating that.
Yeah, with a huge dose of shyness. I think that's something a lot of us have in common, where it's like, we can be super expressive on camera, but as soon as we're just, like, in front of a bunch of people,
it's very different. Yeah, for sure. I mean, even on camera for that matter. I mean, like, there's a lot of people who, like, when they're working on scripts or whatnot, they can say exactly what they want to say in the exact way that they can say it. But then anytime they're on, like, a podcast like this or something like that, suddenly it's just a completely different world, because the communication is so direct and instant in, like, the reactions or whatnot. And there's a lot of creators out there who simply just don't do stuff like this, where because they feel more comfortable with their own, with a little bit more of a gallery-esque of presenting content, right? Yeah. And I think it's similar to streaming, like why some people don't do streaming. Anyway, that's just another tangent, but.
Yeah, and it's like, I've always wanted to try to find, like, what exactly is my. It's been hard to find, like, what my personal style is for video making. Sure. You'll have, like, on the spectrum of, again, if we had to compare Cakecore, where it's super high energy, a mile a minute jokes, compared with Valkyrie Aurora, if you're familiar with her. She did a lot of videos about Nier Automata or the Nier series, Nier Drakengard series on a grander scale, and she she could add in jokes, but for the most part, it was just kind of like this super calming historical piece almost. I think the thing that I was trying to find, I'm sorry for keep bringing up comparisons to Johnny, but again, very influential into why I got into this. It was almost like I like that he has jazz, like a jazziness to his like intro theme,
Right.
because I feel like it fits his personality.
Definitely.
And
that's just something important about like content creation. It's just making sure that these edits or these staples or this branding that you put in very much fits with the personality that you're giving off. And some people, you know, when they create, they're playing a character or whatnot, and that's the kind of personality they need to show rather than themselves. But if you are just trying to be as much yourself, it's important to have like intros and brandings that just kind of reflect that, even like channel names or whatnot. So yeah. And I'm actually glad you keep bringing up Some Call Me Johnny and Cat Icarus and whatnot, because one of my questions was who some of your inspiring creators were. And not only that, but specifically what aspects you draw from each of them. And I think you kind of just answered a big part of that. But if there's any more you'd like to add to that, then, you know, feel free.
I would say there are some figures that I definitely was inspired by when first starting to create videos. And over the past couple of years, some of them I now see in a different light, unfortunately. And without naming names, because I'm not getting into a whole thing here.
Of course.
All I'll say is I have conflicted feelings about my Hide Lied review these days. Or I'm kind of glad I can have it stand apart as its own thing. But it's also like I never wanted it to just be tied to someone else who did it also.
Of course. Well, and to be fair, even without like different lights on people, you know, that's something that's always kind of tough about playing a game like Hide Lied or some other, you know, game where if there's a creator out there who's very much known for like talking about that one specific piece of art or whatnot, and then you also go and like, I'm going to make my own rendition of whatnot. It's really hard to not separate from, in a viewer's perspective, to fully separate who's saying what or whatnot. So it can always be tough anyway, but.
And I definitely had a part of that with the Metroid videos because again, Johnny did, that was something that really helped start his platform back in the day. And so that's something that I know for him very well. It was also really frustrating because there were like 5 other creators that made Other M videos in the past couple of months, and I'm like, what's happening, guys?
Of all games, the Other M, that's crazy.
It's like I've been planning Metroid Month for half a year, and suddenly.
Well, to be fair, I feel like there can never be enough Metroid videos, at least not because I like it so much, but also because for many years, the rate at which people upload Metroid compared to like Mario or Zelda or anything like that is so low that I'm always looking for new videos, you know. I still got something from your videos regardless of whether or not I saw Johnny's, so if that means anything.
So it's like I definitely got a little bit of that when working on especially Other M. I'll tell you, I fear the day that I look at the Metal Gear Solid franchise, because I will not even attempt to review Metal Gear Solid 4 without drawing comparison to the fact that I am heavily influenced by Steak Bentley's 3.5 hour Metal Gear Solid 4 was a mistake video. It's one of my favorite videos on the platform.
Right.
And I think it's and he and I feel exactly the same way on certain things, especially where writing is concerned. We are on the same level there.
And you also can't help but be concerned about accidentally taking other people's jokes or ideas and stuff like that. Like, you really don't want to step on their toes and accidentally say the same thing. But if you both have the same reaction to something, you know, it's still important to share your reactions to art. So it's not like an easy solution, but I know I've definitely felt that before.
But beyond that, I would say over the recent years, I've been starting to branch out a little bit, and as I'm starting to become more part of the community, which I'm still on the very low level of. I'm like right at 2,400 subscribers at this point. I'm not really sure what my video view rate tends to average out to be. I will say the Metroid videos have not performed super great.
It's a darn shame. Who do we talk to about this? We need to fix this.
I mean, it's you know, at the end of the day, it's not about the numbers.
It's not. It's not. But just wait till
yeah.
Prime 4 comes out. Maybe you'll see a tick. Hopefully.
Yeah.
All things.
Well, that was that hour-long Spider-Man video. Last thing I was expecting was for that to get like, I think that's sitting at like 35,000 views or something at this point. It's ridiculous. It's by far the highest viewed video on my channel. But as I'm starting to become part of the community on a larger scale, and I'm starting to meet new people, I'm influenced by other things than just like, oh, this is how they set up jokes. Oh, this is how like you know, they edit their music and everything.
Of course.
One of the things that I wanted to do when I was trying to find my own style and everything was when I was in college, I found I really enjoyed motion graphics. And so this year I put together a motion graphics package, and I got to use it for a while, especially in my Klonoa reviews. I was really happy with that. I've got this like sliding door transition thing that'll go. I had a ton of fun working on the intro screen, but I also had these little transitions where it was like, oh, here we're switching over from the plot summary to the gameplay discussion and stuff like that. And unfortunately, I had to do away with that. Is because it's like I want to create my own style without alienating people that are just trying to watch a video.
Yeah, that's such a relatable problem for a lot of creators. I think just the idea of like, I could really go all out about these like really specific in between moments or whatnot, but the more and more you start working specifically on how you're presented rather than the content you're presenting specifically, it does end up becoming a little bit distracting to newer people who don't understand. And it same thing goes for like inside jokes. You know, there's a lot of channels that have the longer running jokes that keep interfering. You know, a channel I like to bring up as an example, because I respect the channel a whole lot, is Balrog's channel, and how he really likes the way he sets up these long running narratives or whatnot and gives reason to the games that he's playing. And it's such a cool idea. Yeah. But unfortunately, there are some viewers out there who are like, this is hard to come into after just discovering this channel, right? So it's definitely a struggle I think a lot of creators deal with.
And that's something that I had to kind of toy around with, because I personally liked the visual style that brought to the table. I was like, I liked that, oh, we're done with the plot summary. Here's a transition over to this thing. I was really trying to capture this like Y2K DDR aesthetic with the channel for a little while there, and I'm keeping parts of it, but unfortunately other things I'm gonna have to do away with. But the way I used to format videos was I would kind of tackle the plot, and along the way, when it became applicable, I would add in the elements of how that how the gameplay circulates around that and everything, and how it's all presented and stuff like that. It felt like the most natural way to discuss all of it.
Of course.
And so it was just kind of talking about everything at once and just kind of crunching it together. And I had someone comment on one of my videos, I believe it was the Zone of the Enders one, and he said, it's like, I really enjoy your content, but I'm gonna have to skip out on videos that you're making when it comes to games I haven't played yet but I'm interested in, because you do kind of go over the entire story. And
right.
That's when I got the idea to segment things, and then that became to be more work than just doing it the other way. And when I finally got back to doing Metroid, I was like, I can't please everybody, and I'm just gonna have to do it the way I used to.
I mean, and to be fair with Metroid, it very much is a case of like a large cult following. So I feel like the people who are most interested in watching those kind of videos anyway are the people who have already played the games. At least that's how I kind of feel. But, you know, yeah, it is something you have to think about. And I think it's interesting you talk about like motion graphics and how incorporating them is something that's so aesthetically pleasing to you in some cases, but also might be distracting to the viewer. It's interesting because you also mentioned that you originally started more in the animation territory, right? Which is very much visually formal as opposed to video creation, which tends to be a little bit more about building up your concepts and getting your ideas out there, articulating yourself and whatnot. Do you find that there are areas of animation that you appreciate more than video creation, or like vice versa? Like, how would you compare the two so far from your experience?
You'd be surprised how hand in hand they are.
Right.
I will say that the animation process and the video making process are extraordinarily similar. So I went to a four-year university to get my bachelor's in animation because the end goal is eventually to become a game developer. I am currently in the very, very, very early like pre-production phases of creating a game, and that's the goal. That's the dream right there is to make all of that happen. And animation was a stepping stone in getting there, so, specifically 3D animation. Discovering a love for motion graphics was just kind of something that happened by accident.
Sure.
I had a motion graphics course, and we're messing around with all this stuff, and I'm like, oh man, I can create some really cool stuff with this. And then once you figure out how to render out in alpha channels, then it's all over. Then you got to incorporate that stuff into videos. It's
Nothing's more exciting than rendering out in alpha channels, you know. When you think of like exciting things I need to do every day, oh boy,
Yeah.
rendering out in alpha channels. Anything with the word rendering, really, doesn't that just make you guys at home excited? Rendering? Oh,
Well,
boy, it's so
it's
much
like-
fun.
oh my gosh, it has taken so much off my workload that I just have like I've got an entire folder that's just, here's all these assets that I have, and I can take my spoiler alert screen, and it forms itself on top of other footage because of that alpha channel. I don't have to worry about all that negative space in there is just the footage that's underneath it.
Right.
And it makes me happy. It's just the way it comes together. So it was, I think it was then that I started getting more and more interested into the whole video creation process, because it was like, I might be good at this and I want to try it.
Right. But you do still have this end goal of particularly working in game design, right? That's your ultimate like idea.
Yes, and it's been fascinating because part of reviewing other games, and I've never wanted to come at any game, even the ones I don't like, except for Hide Lied, with a vitriolic ideal. It's like I never want to come in and just hate on something. I want to find something I enjoy, and if I can't find redeeming qualities in something, I'm gonna play it up for comedic effect.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I'm not going to scorn the developers. I'm not going to say like, oh, these people have no idea what they're doing. I don't know what kind of hell they were working through
Absolutely.
in the creation process of that game.
Yeah.
And you learn so much from those experiences, and I can tell you that I feel so much more prepared to work on a game now that I know how to analyze other ones.
For sure.
And-
I think that's a great video creation is definitely also, like you were saying, animation is one of like the first stepping stones or whatnot for game development. Video or game critique or whatnot, or even just any kind of art critique, I feel like helps in any form of long-term development like that, you know, just being able to fully formulate these ideas and whatnot.
Yeah. And it's a fascinating process, because it's like, the more you get into it, the more you get an understanding of the very simplest things and how incredibly complicated they are under the hood.
Definitely. And like, you know, the same could be said about even just video creation to a different scale or whatnot, right? So it's any kind of art form you get interested in, it's just like, it's presented to you in front of you as a finished product or whatnot, and it's hard to fully understand that was not always a finished product. You know, there's so many steps that went into that, just with anything like painting or sculptures, and then of course the more digital mediums or whatnot. I'm very interested in like the idea of art in general. Like if that was something I could major in or like study in, I'd probably pick that over graphic design, which is what I'm doing now. But
Okay.
I actually did dabble a little bit in animation in some of my early years, but I ran into like a little bit of a gratification problem where the amount of time you put into it, I wasn't feeling the gratification as quick as I was for things like video creation or whatnot.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you felt that, and if maybe that's why your immediate reaction isn't, I'm going to be an animator, like for a TV series, something like that, right? Like, how do you feel the ratio of gratification or workload that you put in compares with animating specifically?
I will say that there's a level of gratification that I've personally gotten from animated projects that I've worked on that are unparalleled. I can look back at them and think, wow, this looks like garbage to me now.
Sure.
But I still feel a certain sense of pride in it. There's something about the process of animation that excites me, and without sounding too cheesy, it touches me on an emotional level, seeing something come to life like that. And I mean, I'm not ruling out TV animation. I have a pitch put together. There's a script for a pilot of a cartoon series I want to pitch at some point. Maybe Netflix, they pick up everything. And someday.
Sure.
But
well,
that's also, yeah.
It's great that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket too. You know, it's when you first go, at least this is how I kind of, when YouTube was first becoming a thing and YouTubers specifically was becoming an occupation or whatnot, it was definitely easy to get in the case of like, oh, I want to do that. Like, I want to be a YouTuber specifically. No, I don't want to be in any other kind of content creation. I want to do that specifically. But then after spending some more time learning about different art forms, trying out different things, like I got to take a class on sculpting, and I got to take a class on photography, I got to take a class on painting even. After you learn all these different things, you come to realize that there are so many possible outcomes when learning art that you really don't want to focus entirely on one specific project. So I think it's good that you have like this idea of a video game in the back of your head. You have this idea of like animated TV series, because ultimately the ultimate goal is not to be a specific occupation such as a YouTuber. The ultimate goal is to be like, you know, creatively happy and creatively sufficient or whatnot. And there's so many different venues to do that. And even if YouTube looks really cool from the outside, you know, it's very possible that being a YouTuber, this is mostly talking to people out there, being a YouTuber might not be a thing that's entirely enjoyable for you. You know, it might be that there's other forms. So just try to keep your, you know, your bases covered and be open to other opportunities. You know, sometimes that if the more specific you make your dream, the harder it is can be to reach, obviously. So feel free to broaden your dream a little bit, you know, get ready to accept other opportunities. But yeah, anyway. Did I cut you off? I don't remember if you were finished or not. No? Okay. Well, we are actually kind of approaching around the ending time or whatnot. There is still a question I wanted to ask you, though, because I have been asking other creators about this. 2020 has been a difficult time for everybody, obviously. And then every person I've brought on so far, I've asked the same question, which is just, how have you been creatively dealing with everything that's happened in 2020? Have you been feeling more inspired because there's not much other things to do? Have you felt an entire drainage? I mean, obviously right now you're on a pretty good upload schedule. Have you been indulging more in other people's content? Have you been finding inspiration in places where you haven't usually? What's your general change of mindset been with this year? On a creative level. I don't mean to pry into your personal life or anything like that, you know.
Oh, no, you're good. I think just because the creation process is such an avid part of where my life is right now. I mean, you can even ask my roommates or my friends at work. It is
you right now. It is you.
Yeah. I probably talk about like my video creation process more than anything else because it's just something that excites me.
Of course.
And I will say that because 2020 was very difficult, it is very difficult. It continues to be, and it will continue to be. Finding happiness in that meant a lot. And I'll tell you what else helped was just connecting with people more. And I think I started to understand a deeper importance behind that.
And you feel that you've been connecting with people more since everything started happening? Like it somehow brought you closer to people?
Absolutely. And now it helps that like I'm just in a new environment now than I was as I had just moved into a new place last December. And so it was kind of like I had a couple of months to adjust, but then things started moving. But it was also I'm making more friends at work. I'm making friends online. It's been incredible getting to know Cullen. He's another great content creator. I have to mention him. He's been having me on for streams and everything, and I'd consider him a good friend, and he
E-
and I have connected recently.
Every person
And
I bring on brings up at least that one like really close creative friend. Like I got to give a shout out to my boy, because
yeah,
ultimately, like your social life has such an impact on your creative drive as well. If I know whenever I'm socially like okay, socially responsive or whatnot, I find that my attitude towards creating becomes so much more enjoyable somehow because it all
yeah.
does kind of connect, and that's why you got to be worried about the kind of the problems we were talking about earlier about like being a workaholic or whatnot. You got to make sure you
Mhm.
separate time just for like friends and family and whatnot. But anyway, yeah, sorry, continue.
And it's like the year has definitely offered a lot of food for thought, and it's definitely recontextualized a lot of things that, like, I obviously knew it was important to connect with friends and to get to know people on a certain level. I know that one of the things going into the YouTube spectrum, especially once you start to pick up an audience and you start to connect with other creators, you start to look towards the creators that inspired you and be thinking to yourself is like, oh, what if I get to meet them one day or anything. Now that I've met a lot of them, it's like I'm not really on a best friend level with many. I have exchanged greetings with some call me Johnny on more than one occasion. Most of these people I've met through Magfest. Um, it's like I've gotten to talk to a couple of really cool creators, and then there will be people like Super Butterbuns, who I've been following for a long time, and she definitely helped kick off. As I think I was starting to get really into her content um, around the time I was first starting to try it myself. And she's this super cool person that's doing a lot of really funny videos and everything like that. And I is like she's a super talented person. And you're starting to look at these people that are like, oh, they're these almost like celebrities within this space. Dude, getting to know them is like the fact that I can call her a friend at this point means something to me on a deeper level than just, oh, hey, I'm friends with this really cool content creator I used to look up to. It's just like, no, like she's actually an incredible human being
Right.
that I'm really glad to have a part of my life. Same with Cullen, same with Shib, same with so many of these other people. Same with the guys I grew up with, like Trail Mix Blazer, who was doing some streaming for Among Us the other night. And it's like, it's not, and I said it earlier in the video, it's not about the numbers, it's about that sense of community. And I
Definitely.
think 2020 has definitely made that so much more apparent.
For
It's
sure.
like there's an importance that comes with like, oh, you've got a platform that you can speak through now. Um I will say that there were definitely some events within this year that I should definitely hope got some eyes open towards there's some people that we need to start paying more attention to. There's definitely some communities that we've been neglecting.
Right.
And it's like it's sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. There's so much
I
that's
think I know what
happened.
you're saying. With 2020, it really has been just a time of reflecting on what's being said and what actually needs to be said and what needs to be heard and whatnot.
Yeah,
And as creators, I think it is inspiring. I think we have to kind of look at that. We have to, because we now have the time to pay attention to that. We have to, right?
yeah,
So, and I think I understand where that kind of creative growth comes from, where it's just like, okay, what's actually important in what I do and what I say or whatnot, and let me focus specifically on that as opposed to all this other noise that we've been subject to since before 2020. All that to say, I'm not trying to say 2020 has been an amazing year or anything like that, but
yeah,
for creators, it has been at the very least an opportunity for so many of us to really reflect on things and our creations and whatnot.
yeah,
And what you were saying too about just connecting with other people, like was one of the reasons I started this podcast was because I wanted to talk to creators on a creator level as opposed to what other level I might talk to, or like instead of like, hey, can I have an autograph and stuff like that. Like I wanted to fully talk about the creative mindsets or whatnot. And I think it's helpful information for other people out there. And like this is the kind of podcast that I wish I would have like listened to at some point growing up. But you don't find a ton of stuff like this. But So basically, that kind of really hit home with, like you're saying, viewing them as like a friend as opposed to celebrity. Even just being able to have this conversation right now, just between you and me. I've had like other creators too, where like in my head before I'm thinking like, oh man, these guys are bigger than I am. Like they've been an inspiration. A big one for me was Lorenzo de Sakura, formerly known as Zerachi. I watched him a lot growing up, and like it's easy to get in your head like, oh man, I'm about to talk to someone I've been watching for a long time. But ultimately, once you get into the conversation, it's the conversation that's important. And I feel like, in a same sense, 2020 has been a great opportunity for me to really delve more into that. The content is the content, what we're saying, what we're speaking, the ideas, the relations that we're having, and trying to help other people. Like that's what's become important. And it's easy to lose track of that kind of stuff with everything else going on. So.
And it's definitely also important from when you're not like when you're not holding people up on a pedestal. Once you do start to find yourself building traction and everything like that, it helps if you're not putting that pressure on other people. You'll stop putting so much pressure on yourself.
Definitely.
As Tyler or Buns and I were talking about, I'm starting to get that understanding of, you start building an audience, you start getting a lot of messages, you want to answer all of them, you can't. You cannot.
Right.
It's like you want to connect with every single person that wants to talk to you, and it feels weird. It feels weird when and again, I'm a small creator. Like I'm some dude in his office like making dumb videos in my off time, and I've got people that are I have like a handful of people that will treat me like I'm on some kind of pedestal, and I don't understand it because again, I'm just some dude, and I've never considered myself as a role model or as a as anything like that. And so when you start seeing people that start treating you that way, it does start you start to recontextualize how you've looked at other people. And it's good to respect people. It's good to be excited to know someone. It's good to be excited to meet somebody.
It's good
but
to be
it's
inspired,
like,
it's all good things. It's just we're all people, right?
Yeah, it's like don't worship these people. Don't don't put all of your eggs in that basket. Don't put that pressure on them.
Yeah.
And to relate that back to just like the theme of 2020 and what that's meant for me as a content creator is just, man, everybody's got a lot of pressure right now.
Yeah.
And that has built up so much in the creative space where it's like the people with audiences are trying to be something that is just, if I can be that one thing that you look forward to in the midst of all of this.
Yeah.
If I can provide some entertainment or some leisure in the middle of this crisis.
Right.
Or if I can just be an escape for a little bit. Or mixed with I'm trying to get all of this done, and look at all of this that's piling up on me.
Right.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It is so much. And I'm one of the people that I will say I've gotten off really lucky in the midst of everything here.
Sure.
Even outside of just the content creation, because I have been seeing a lot of growth recently, is just even at work. I work retail, which has sucked on some levels during this past year because, man, the people come in. But it's also been, our company has done really well this year because I work at a used game shop, and what's everybody doing when they're stuck inside?
Right.
So it's like financially we've done well. I have a roof over my head with two amazing roommates that I love to death. And I've got a lot of great friends, new and old, surrounding me constantly. And I can appreciate that so much more this year than I think I ever had before.
It's so easy to take all of that for granted, like leading up to this. But when you see all these other people who have been struggling, it does at the very least give you more appreciation for your loved ones and whatnot, and the people who take care of you. And that's definitely one of the silver linings. And yeah, that tends to be something that a lot of people bring up when I ask them this question too. Sometimes, like, and it's not meant to be a doom and gloom question, right? It's meant to be exploring like the creative side of it or whatnot, and like you said, just focusing in on what's important in content creation, or even just in things in general. But yeah, I feel like people like us get off a little bit easier than some others, or a little bit more fortunate in that sense, because we actually enjoy making content, right?
Yeah.
So, hey, all that said, though, we are actually running out of time here. But yeah, just in general, fellas, if you have ever been wanting to create, maybe now's a good time. Maybe now's a good time to just try to get your thoughts out there, and yeah, just try to focus on the important aspects of creating instead of the huge plethora of non-important aspects of creating. And I think ultimately you'll be creatively happy in that sense. So we're going to start wrapping up here. If you wouldn't mind, you can share where people can find you, and any kind of general goals that you're working towards or whatnot, or things they can expect in the coming months. Where is Wayne at for the next foreseeable future?
So, I'm trying to figure that out. I think the next big thing I'm looking forward to, I'm trying to figure out what my next game review is going to be when I'm done with my break and I'm actually allowing myself to work again. But I think I'm going to take it back to some simpler stuff. Might do the Atlantis game for the PS1, just some fun, stupid,
Very exciting
nonsense. I'm also going to be doing some stuff about the PlayStation 5. I should be expecting that. I think should hopefully be coming in the mail day one. If everything goes the way it's supposed to. Definitely doing a video about Miles Morales. The rest I'm just kind of playing by ear. So we'll see how all that goes. But until then, you can find me on Twitter, Twitch, Discord, whichever you prefer. Links in some description somewhere.
Oh shoot, I gotta write a description. Let me make a note of that. No, yeah. Everything you'll need to find him will be in the description below.
Yeah.
Twitter's probably the best place, right, to find updates specifically.
I am by far the most active on Twitter. If you ever want to see what I am up to, if you want to see what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what kind of stupid customer came in through the door today, it's always going to be on Twitter. I try to be more active on Discord. I really want to. I'm doing my best. And it's all under the handle of Wayneisboss. So far, it's been pretty universal. I've been able to use that just about everywhere. But Twitter, definitely the best place to see updates. That is also my YouTube username. Twitch as well, which I'm going to be trying to do more often. That's something to look forward to. I'm definitely streaming more often now that I'll be making videos a little less often. Try to give myself some leisure time. Well,
I'll make sure to leave a link to Twitch specifically then as well, in addition to the other things, of course. And for all of you watching out there, if you missed something or just weren't paying attention for part of it, you can always check out my channel where I will be uploading these into topics or whatnot. So if you ever want to reference these back later and find specific aspects, you can always do that then. And of course, there will always be more podcasts on the way twice a month now. So make sure you guys tune in for that. Wayne, thank you so much for joining me today. I very much appreciate it. Had a very pleasant discussion on the ins and outs of your creating style. And I appreciate you giving me the time to talk about this. And with that, I believe we're all finished here. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Me.
Thank you.
See you next mission.